You're going through a midlife divorce, but you're having your time of your life on a luxury cruise with your new boyfriend. You want all the world to see how happy you are and maybe stick it to your ex a little bit. So you post some Bahama beach pics on your Facebook profile. Yet, somewhere in the dark recesses of your brain, that part of your brain that's still working, you wonder if this is a good idea. Our guest today would say, when in doubt, log out. When in doubt, log out. That's the catchy title of a blog post by attorney Nicole Sodoma on the subject of social media and divorce. Nicole is the founder of Sodoma Law, the largest family law firm in North and South Carolina. Nicole isn't just a litigator. She's someone who's helped people through some of the hardest chapters of their lives and written about it too. Her book, Please Don't Say You're Sorry, an empowering perspective on marriage, separation, and divorce from a marriage-loving attorney, is an honest human guide many of you going through Gray Divorce will enjoy. Nicole, welcome to the Gray Divorce podcast.
Thank you so much. You know, I've written so much. I've been practicing law for 26 years, and the law firm opened 18 years ago, and I can tell you, I can't remember the titles of my blogs or articles, or it's fun to hear about things I've written, and it's true. Social media is such a beast, and so I'm excited to be able to talk about it with you. So
we're anxious to hear what you have to say, Nicole, and I'm sure our listeners will enjoy hearing your thoughts. It is a catchy title, and I'm often trying.
Wrote it.
Well, maybe you've got an assistant somewhere and needs some props. I don't know, but it's a good one. Take credit for it. Why not? I'm curious about, before we begin talking about social media, I'm curious about your self-description as a marriage-loving divorce attorney. Could you just shed some color on that before we begin?
Sure. I mean, after I wrote the book, it was really clear, before we had a title for it, it was clear that my interest was not in divorcing people. It was, it was giving them resources and tools to figure out how to stay married and to recognize when they couldn't. And so, I'd been a divorce attorney for 20 years when I decided to get divorced. And I realized that there were all these things that my clients had not been telling me, and all these things that I wish I'd been telling my clients. So it was this very eye-opening moment for me, and I learned all these things that maybe I could have done differently inside my marriage. And maybe it would have changed the results. I don't know. I can't go backwards. But what I can say is, when I wrote the book, it's divided into three parts. The first is, marriage. The second is separation, and the third is divorce. And they're all very different seasons to me.
Right.
And so, and at the end of each section, there are hard questions. So again, I recognize then that I'm a marriage-loving divorce attorney. It doesn't have to be the answer, and I don't want it to be the answer. I want it to be that both parties have tried to make it work, recognize they can't, but also the realization that if one party, I say it takes two to say I do and one to say I don't. If one party doesn't want to be in the marriage anymore, then that is likely what's going to happen. So
Right.
Divorce is likely to be imminent, and so I want you to be prepared for that.
No, that's very important, and I've experienced the same thing. Since I got divorced about 12 years ago, and I've been doing this work for about 10 years, and the podcast for 4 years. I've learned a lot about counseling and discernment counseling, in which I did an episode with a lady who's a discernment counselor. The whole idea is, should I stay or should I go? And it alerted me to certain tools that I wasn't aware of that might have been useful. I don't know if they would have made a difference ultimately, but it's good to know that there are tools out there for people who aren't quite sure. And if they think it's worth making an effort to save the marriage, then know that there are some people out there, some professionals who can be very helpful in doing that. But as you say, if one person is determined to stay out, you can't keep them married.
Right. I mean, it's a very different scenario than when you get married. So, and I have put couples back together. I've scared them back together. I've hosted a couple of matchmaking events for people that have gone through separation and divorce, because it is a different season and your friends change. And there's no age discrimination when it comes to that season. You all experience, very similar things, and it's hard to talk about those things with people who haven't experienced it is what I see the most often. So, yes, it's been eye-opening, and it's also been nice to be able to see what people are willing to share outside of the courtroom, outside of my conference room, about that season when you take them out of that environment. So
let's talk a little bit about social media. And as an attorney, how does social media even play into your work with your clients? I mean, how can something that somebody posts on social media even be admitted in a case? How does it work legally?
Legally speaking, social media, you're essentially creating exhibits. You are, in essence, litigating your life through social media every time you post. And in real life, it can be a screenshot of what you post. It can be what someone else has posted and tagged you. It can be, there's so many different uses of social media in all of its platforms. And the most obvious is going to be a screenshot, but you also can do screen recordings. It might not be something that you or someone else posts. It might be back in the days of check-ins, when you were online on social media and you checked in somewhere.
Hang on, I don't remember check-ins. That might be before.
Oh, yes, there was like a Foursquare or whatever the name of that app was. I'm sure they're going to come back. Think about on social media your location settings. So, Instagram has the option of having your location turned on. One of my first things that I want to tell clients is, if you have social media, I want you to turn off your location. So, and they might not even know it's on. It might have been turned on by default. So lots of advice around social media, and it far extends from it being used as an exhibit in the courtroom.
Is a screenshot supplied by your client of a screenshot of a post done by the opposing side typically presented to you by your client? Or do you do the research yourself?
It depends. It depends on the client. It depends, if there's discovery in the case. So if there's discovery in the case and it asks, when social media first became hot, discovery requests would actually include a request with instructions on how to download every post you've ever made in Facebook. That's what I remember where the original instruction came from. It would say, please provide any and all social media content on your Facebook page, including the messaging portion of Facebook. And then it would give the client instructions on what they needed to produce. So at that point, you had, you could print everything, provide it digitally, or, there were occasions where I said, just hand over your password, your credentials to opposing counsel, and we'll put some parameters around their access. So yes, the answer is yes. There is nothing private. There is nothing confidential. There is very little that can't be used. Now, one of the clarifications I do want to make, I think this is really important. Even if the content of what you're posting may not be used as evidence, right? So, but the biggest problem with social media is that it's going to impact your credibility one way or another.
Right.
And so, I mean, and that's where I think we really started seeing the biggest difference in the use of social media. You might forget what you posted, or you got tagged in something and didn't realize that you were tagged.
Yeah.
And your testimony says one thing and your social media says another. And so you're essentially putting your social media as if it's a witness on the witness stand.
This is so important in gray divorce, mid to late life divorce, because it's really about asset division and spousal support more so than custody issues. And if what you're posting contradicts your claim about your finances, you can do your case a world of hurt. No, I mean, if I'm posting if I'm getting divorced and I'm posting a vacation picture, maybe on Crystal Cruises, yet I'm pleading poverty, that's not going to do my case any good, is it?
No, that is not going to help. It's going to impact your credibility. So there might be a very reasonable excuse, a very reasonable circumstance how you ended up on that cruise, but the initial impact of those photos and your lifestyle is already creating another story. And then also the impression you're making on opposing counsel, on the judge, and it's the opposing counsel's job to wreck your credibility. So, I liken this to dating. So, can you date after separation? And a lot of times in gray divorce, you haven't dated in years, right?
Right.
And so you're excited, you want to post about this new life, this new chapter, you want to feel validated in the decisions you're making. But every time you post or every time someone posts about you, it tells a new story. So maybe you're just looking for validation on social media and you're just trying to make yourself feel better. But the reality is it's telling its own story. And so when you date, when you make those decisions, you're increasing your litigation expense. First, you need to check with your lawyer to make sure that you're in a state where you can date and when you can date.
Right, because different states have different responses to this.
That's exactly right. So, for example, in North Carolina, you can start dating the minute after you are separated. The law treats you as if you're unmarried. It's no longer considered adultery. Now, do I want you to date? No, I really don't, because it's going to add the expense to your case, because now we're going to be litigating your credibility as to when you met that person. Have you spent marital funds on that person? Your lifestyle is now going to change because of that person. And you will feel punished over those decisions, even though those decisions were the ones that made you feel best. And so it's an unfair situation, but it is a real situation. And so you have to make those decisions carefully.
It doesn't do any good either, particularly with the dating, that you're really potentially inflaming the emotions of your soon-to-be ex as well. And we all know that extreme emotions in divorce is the enemy of rational thinking, and more likely to do damage emotionally and financially over the course of the divorce case. So,
it makes negotiation. Typically, it makes negotiation more complicated. So, because yes, one person is now distracted with the other person, right? The new person in your life. And there are emotions that come into play that really don't have any business being in the conversation, especially if, but just because you're allowed to legally do something doesn't mean that you should.
Can you see a safe point in the process when somebody can go public with a divorce? I'm sorry, public with dating, or should it just always be kept on the down low?
After you signed whatever settlement document or received whatever final court order there is. And let me caveat that too. You can date, there is, I don't know, that's a hard question. There's no safe time. Of course, I mean, you get to choose, check the law in your state, check with your lawyer. You get to choose what decision that is. Your lawyer is going to deal with the consequences. It's not the end of the world, but you need to be prepared that there may be some unintended consequences of dating, right? So whether it's safe, I don't know. The second, I guess the caveat to that is, even if it has no business being in the conversation, it makes negotiations more difficult. And then the other piece that I want to, and I know I've said that twice because it really does make negotiations that much more difficult. But the other piece is, if the safest place, of course, is after you've got a signed settlement document, a signed agreement, take a break, and now go live your life. If you are in the courtroom, the thing that I want people to be aware of is you can be in the courtroom or you can be in mediation. If you're not actually signing a document or you don't have a court order, there is sometimes a period of time where you have an agreement, their words, it might be a memorandum, or the judge has made a ruling, but until it is reduced to a writing and signed, it's not done. And from a litigator's perspective, from a client's perspective, I don't think that's super clear for clients because, it's not unusual. That's a double negative. It's not unusual, if I can say it that way, for us to go to court in May and maybe not get a ruling until July. And so
It's typical.
I mean, and then you get a ruling, and then it's got to be reduced to a writing, and you all have to agree on it. And so you've got this probably the stickiest period of time.
Yeah.
Because values change on assets, debts change, and you may have really taken a deep breath, and you're like, now I'm going to start living my life. And you start posting on social.
Yeah.
And you start GLP-1s, and you start this health conscious, and you meet someone and you want to be validated and you want to be happy, and those things start happening, and it impacts what is going to happen before it gets reduced to a writing.
Yeah, you can blow it all up. Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's good advice, Nicole. I want to go back to the money again, and the asset division and financial contradictions, insofar as we're talking about asset division and spousal support. Because I always, everything I do, everything I write, everything I say in my work as a certified divorce financial analyst, I'm very careful to say I'm not an attorney. I do not offer legal advice nor tax advice for that matter. But my work often does take me to doing some legal research. And I love finding documented cases where that serve as interesting illustrations of discussions I'm having on the podcast. And I came across one that points up financial contradictions. And I'm assuming now, I did get this on the internet, so knock on wood that this is a reliable case. But apparently Safdar versus AFW Inc., a party used the opposing party's own Facebook page, which showed 9 business locations, to contradict his sworn financial affidavit, which claimed only 2. I'm sure you've seen similar such things.
Well, and think about LinkedIn. You might say retired
in
your financial affidavit.
Yes.
But then LinkedIn says you're consulting, or you're on a board, there's so many. Or another company has you listed on their board, and you don't have it listed. You have retired executive. So yes, there are, that is something to be very aware of from a financial contradiction, and that's straight from social. And
Yeah.
I didn't look up the case. I don't know that case. I'm leery about, the internet,
Yeah.
and using AI to talk about case law. But that is, the scenario is quite common.
Yeah. And
And if
I,
you haven't, and then the next piece of that is, when's the last time you updated your profiles, especially as it relates to your jobs and thinking about the posts that you've made. Um, and then, of course, I think of, do you want to delete, and when do you want to change those posts? If you know that you are planning to separate and you are in those preparation stages, I'd be very careful about what you change without the advice of counsel, because you don't want it to look like you're deleting because you don't want it to be used against you. And the idea of spoliation comes into play, where really it comes back to credibility and that financial contradiction, and what does it look like you're hiding.
so in terms of deleting posts, I want to get to this because let's say you realize things aren't going well in your marriage, and you realize, there's probably some you haven't spoken to you. I haven't spoken to you yet, but maybe it's time to clean up your Facebook page. I mean, nothing wrong with cleaning up your profile before speaking to you or entering the divorce process, is there? I mean, that's the time to do it.
I mean, I would think about the unintended consequences of making changes on social, and what changes you want to make. So, and for gray divorce, don't forget, we also you might have adult children.
Right.
And and the impact, we don't talk about. I did a reel not that long ago on the impact of gray divorce on adult children,
Oh,
and how
definitely.
often adult children are overlooked, and
Yes.
the impact it has on them and on grandchildren. But that's a real thing. And so when you go to clean up social, recognizing the impact of what you're doing on the rest of the family, I think is really important.
Well, there's two things there, Nicole. I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, as regular listeners to the podcast will know, because I'm continually surprised by this, is that my most listened to podcast episode was with Dr. Carol Hughes, who wrote the book Home Will Never Be the Same Again, which deals with the issue of adult children in divorce. So
Yeah.
it's an unappreciated area of the divorce world, because as an attorney, when a client comes into your office, probably one of your first questions is going to be, do you have any minor children? And many attorneys, when they hear the answer no, will move on to the next question immediately.
Not me.
Well, tell us.
I want to know where your adult children are, what they do for a living, and if you've talked to them about what's happening.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, not only from a support system perspective, but also what they know, and what is confidential, and how they're being impacted, and what's being shared with them. Because there are consequences to it, but also it's emotional, right?
For sure. And the interesting thing that really hit home to me is that minor children, especially younger children, they may not be aware of what's going on around them. Yes, I know psychologists can argue certainly they do, but depending on the parents. But adult children can go through so many different life phases. Adults can span from graduating high school to claiming Medicare, and I've seen adult children of divorcing people in that age range, up to the 60s. And how many different life phases are there? Anyway, it's a very fascinating subject. But let's get back to adult children in the context of social media.
Okay.
I'm curious, can posts from adult children, not the divorcing spouse, be used as evidence?
Of course. Anything online that is created, I mean, especially when it tags you or you're in the photo, can be used as evidence. Now, whether what's on in the post is substantive, it's how it's used, right? It's more about credibility, your credibility. Lawyers love to find inconsistencies in your stories. And so, I want you to, and speaking of stories that you think are temporary, the story at the top, the stories you think are temporary, they're only going to be up for 24 hours, don't have to be temporary if somebody took a screenshot of that story, right? So, speaking of stories. But yes, if it's on social media, it could very well be used. And I want to mention this too. Don't forget about group chats and group text messaging and the conversations you're having with friends and family also can be used in social and could be used as exhibits.
Right, right. The definition of social media, I mean, should be expanded, certainly. I mean, you see texts brought up in legal proceedings all the time. I'm curious on
WhatsApp.
Pardon me?
And WhatsApp.
And WhatsApp.
Yes, I mean, you think, and there's also a way. This could be a whole nother conversation, probably one when we talk about AI. But you can change the face of an app to make it look like it's a calculator, but under the calculator app is actually the app you're using to communicate.
I look forward to that discussion about AI because I'm already thinking of so many other issues that can arise there. I wanted one last question about adult children, though. What's the best way for the older person getting divorced to have that conversation with their adult child about being careful on social media without coming across like, they're infringing their liberties or policing them?
I mean, carefully, right? Because, I mean, I guess first of all, I think it depends on the relationship you have with your adult children. But the whole idea is this is a season, and I would, how you want to communicate that is up to you. It's much like I get the question a lot, when should I tell them that I don't want to be married anymore? Or what's the safest way to tell them? So it really depends on the circumstance. It depends on the people, the family, but being really clear about what your intention is. You don't want to make the separation unnecessarily complicated. You don't know what the unintended consequences are of a post. And I think one of the problems in all that is you might think that the post is harmless.
Right.
But you can't predict what someone else is going to feel or what they are going to notice in the post. I mean, maybe you have a new watch on. Maybe your wife bought a new Chanel purse, and you're trying to figure out, you can screenshot that purse and plug it into Google and say, oh my God, that purse was thousands of dollars. How is she affording that? We don't have that kind of money. So you have no concept of what they're going to see. And so you might think it's harmless. And I think that's really the point, is I just don't want to make this unnecessarily complex. I don't want anyone to get hurt that doesn't have to, I don't want anyone involved. So to the extent possible,
when in doubt, log out.
What you post. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
In preparing for this conversation about social media, it's all too common and all too easy these days to criticize social media, and certainly it is a subject, can be subject to a number of criticisms societally, and the impact it's having on people, the impact it's having on young people, and in this specific situation, the very detrimental impact social media posts can have when you're going through the divorce process. But I did want to mention briefly some of the positive aspects of social media in terms of giving people maybe a sense of community, if particularly older people, or helping them with feelings of isolation when they're going through divorce. And as I always say, the number one thing when you're going through divorce is get educated about the process. I suppose this podcast might be considered social media to some extent. I don't know the official definitions. I suppose the issue might be, and I'm just thinking of this right now, is that so many great educational sites, but many of them are forums. So maybe a forum would be great to read, but you want to be careful about participating in a forum, perhaps asking legal questions on a Facebook divorce group, for instance.
Yes, I mean, your engagement is not private.
Yeah.
So asking questions. And I also warn you that if you are asking questions or you're reading other people's questions, that the answer may not be applicable to your circumstance.
Right.
And it's hard to undo and unread what you read. So I agree, those forums do often provide, some sense of community, but being really careful about your engagement, what you post. The other thing is, on some of the social media sites, when you like a comment, when you are following a group, like that is also, it's a story you're telling about yourself.
Definitely. And we've seen politicians get into trouble in the media for liking an inflammatory post that some extremist may have posted.
Yes, that's exactly right. So, that's that unintended consequence. Didn't really think about it when I commented on someone else's success or followed that group or was in that forum and wrote back to someone who'd, experienced, like, successfully. I mean, you just never know. You just don't know. And so just being really careful with your engagement in those forums.
Well, good advice, Nicole. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up for our listeners? I do want you to provide your information about how our listeners might get a hold of you, might contact your firm. Is there anything else on the subject of social media we haven't covered?
I think, the biggest takeaways are, for me, to make sure that my clients know is to not post. If you're going through separation, before, during, and after, give it some time, but really just a moratorium from posting on any social media and asking your friends and family to do the same. Second is nothing is temporary. And not on social media. If you think it's temporary, whether it's a story, a tag, it's likely not temporary. What you delete is also really important. So being aware of what you delete, that's my third. And I'd say my fourth is, if you are going to post, text, email, whatever your way of communicating, are you okay if a judge read it in the courtroom? Are you okay if the judge saw it?
Yeah.
And is it going to contradict anything else that you've said? Because your credibility often means more than the exhibit that is entered. So
that's great advice, Nicole. And as my work as a financial advisor, I operate under the principle that I would say nothing to a client that I wouldn't want put on the front page. Of course, it shows how old I am. I wouldn't want anything put on the front page of a newspaper.
I miss my Sunday paper. I was just saying that the other day. I loved having a Sunday paper.
I know.
It was my age too.
that used to be the thing.
Yes.
Nicole, if our listeners want to find out more about you and your firm, how do they do so?
The name of our firm is Sodoma Law, Sodoma, and I'm Nicole Sodoma, and I'm pretty sure that at this point in my life, if you typed in Nicole and divorce attorney, you probably would find me. But we are in North Carolina and South Carolina, and we consult everywhere. The attorney that you pick is your voice. The advice you get, it needs to be meaningful, and finding someone who is the right one for you, to speak for you, to give you advice during this season is really important, because you don't want them on your payroll for the for the long term. You want them to connect you with the right people, the right resources, give you the right tools. So choose wisely, and happy to help if I can, and love talking with you and love talking about social media. We could talk about it all day long.
It's a very rich subject. Thank you very much, Nicole.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Grey Divorce Podcast. To learn more or get in contact with your host, you can visit Andrew's website at transcendretirement.net. Also, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Information provided is educational only and should not be construed as legal or tax advice. Each situation is unique and should be discussed with your tax or legal advisor prior to implementation. Andrew Hatherley is not an attorney and does not provide legal advice. Information provided is financial in nature. Advisory services offered through Hatherley Capital Management, LLC. Divorce financial analysis services offered through Wiser Divorce Solutions, an affiliated company.